Hello, everybody, and welcome to Favorite Rugby on Favorite Sports for today's Chasing the Sun 2 episode 4 review. Taking a bit of time to get this out. I have been traveling a bit in the last few days. Been down in Cape Town, so I only managed to watch it this morning. I thought I'd just jump on and talk about it because I think we got so much information out of this episode, and for me, it was always going to be the most interesting because it was the closest the Boks really came to being knocked out of the World Cup. Yes, that French game was absolutely um, ridiculous in terms of how close it was and the ebb and flow of the game and stuff like that. But the Boks were always in the game. The Boks, I don't think ever looked out of it. Whereas against England, probably the worst performance of the World Cup really from the Springboks, and one that had to come back from behind right towards the death. And so interesting to see the work that was done in the lead up to the game, which then comes true during that sort of 80 minutes. But before we sort of talk about it, please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. A little bit of insight, I think, as well into the potential captaincies of the future, given the fact that we are talking about potentially a new Springbok captain being announced potentially sometime this year. We wait to see exactly what will happen with Siya Kolisi and whether he will continue in that role. But before we sort of get there, I just want to talk a little bit about obviously that French game. Right towards the end, Andre Pollard, and the reliable boot, and for me, the build up to this England game was so interesting because we got to see the stories of, for example, an Oxenchair who was made his debut against Wales in a losing debut, and you kind of think a lot of those players who made their debut then in that sort of makeshift Springbok team, a lot of them haven't come back from it, and he is a player who had to really go back, grind his way back into that Springbok setup, and basically won us the semi-final. If you look at that scrummaging performance that he put in, absolutely incredible, one of the all-time great performances, and it's interesting on the back of, within the last month, we've heard about potential rules that might remove as much scrummaging is currently happening. And I think this episode really put a light on just why the scrum is so important to rugby, in terms of it being so important for different types of players, different types of builds of players to be able to play the game. And that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? Rugby's supposed to be a game for everyone, anybody, shapes or size and stuff like that. And this is what Chasing the Sun really shows. For me, two players, who show that it's so inclusive. You look at Oxenchair, really a big player, but not made on an orthodox build. Varsity Russ makes the joke, saying not sure he can actually bend. He's built like a bar bridge, and he is. You look at him, he's quite. He's not the tallest guy, but very compact, and it's basically a scrummaging dream the way he's built. And they talk about how strong he is, and he comes on in that second half in that England game, which that out of it really. And almost single-handedly, obviously the pack stepped up, and Andre Pollard's boot was the difference. But won those penalties, shifted the momentum, which gave the Springboks the edge. And somebody else is Quacker Smith, who I think during the World Cup really showed just how valuable of a player he is. I think he could be in conversation for one of the best loose forwards in the world at the moment. You talk about the BITDEFENDER performance in that final, and that was a performance of the ages. Siya Kolisi playing some of his best rugby, but in terms of a player that can affect a game, that can create, game-changing moments. Quacker Smith, the turnovers during that France quarter final. Some of the interventions he had in the semi-final. He's become such an important part of the Springboks because he's just a point difference. And this is the interesting thing about the Springbok squad, is that every single player has a party trick. They even talk about it. And somebody like, for example, a Currie, Ches and Colby. They first of all have to be good at their core principles. They have to be good at chasing down balls. They have to be good defensively, but they've got their party trick. And for both of them, for Colby, I think his defense could almost be considered as party trick. But for Arendse, you've got the speed of him, the step, how deceptively good he is, for example, in the air, and such a good position, and also really good last man defender. But you look at Quacker Smith, and his breakdown work is just, I think, second to none, to be honest. I think there are people who might be able to match him, but I don't think you're going to find a better player over the ball than him. And you look at this, and I think this episode should have showed you exactly how difficult it was to win the World Cup. They were found out against England. If you're going to be brutally honest, they were found out, and they admitted it. They said, they outplayed us. They said they played the same game plan against us, and we didn't know how to cope. We couldn't cope. And it's amazing how during the moments when you're down and out, the cream rises to the crop. Pieter-Steph du Toit, the intervention at halftime, somebody who is very softly spoken and doesn't say much, all of a sudden saying, no, this is actually nonsense. Step up and let's get back into this game. You see how the big players, stand up in the big moments. Even Edsbeth coming on the second half after the yellow card in the France quarterfinal, and scoring a try, getting us over the line. Archie Snyman coming off the bench, scoring a try, and you see these players who are built for the big moments, and that's what the Springbok side is they're full of players who are built for the big moments. For me, very interesting insight into the leadership within the box, and we're waiting to see if we might see a Springbok captain. And you look at Bongi Mbonambi in that semi-final, obviously the scene in the change room where he sort of breaks down, and you can just see it was just, obviously he was the captain in those sort of final stages. Similarly in the quarterfinal, he was the captain in those final stages, and he had to get them over the line. And you can see exactly what it means to them. But also, the Rassi was talking about the fact, he said, Springbok captain, and the pressure comes with it. They made the right call, giving him that responsibility. Makes you wonder, is he potentially going to be the leading candidate for the Springbok captaincy this year, I think Eben Etzebeth, I think it's between him and Eben Etzebeth. I don't think that Lekanya will come to the conversation as much because he's not as close to the scrum. I think, they've always liked a forward or even a fly half or scrum half, and sort of the captaincy in regards to being close to the scrum, close to the referee all the time. That's the main thing. So I think that those two got the front runners. I think Bongi Mbonambi was given this responsibility a lot of the time because, he was probably going to be coming off the bench for Malcolm Marx. And given the fact that suddenly we had brought Jean Clay, and then we had a genuine like replacement for Eben Etzebeth, and we could look at a 6-2 split, and we could actually look at managing Eben Etzebeth a bit more. And I think that's probably why they sort of looked at somebody like who's going to be the captain in the latter stages of the games. Pollard was injured and wasn't looking good. The Kanyam was injured, not looking good. And they had to look around and then say, right, who's going to get us over the line during the last days? And Bongi Mbonambi was the obvious candidate. He was being used off the bench. And then when Malcolm Marx got injured, they basically said, right, well, you have to play full 80. So that means he was still going to be there at the end. So, I think that's might be a reason that gives them sort of an edge over Eben Etzebeth. I think you look at the two of them, and I think they can both very, very easily be captains. Personally, I'd actually almost prefer not to be Etzebeth. There's a saying in football which says, don't captain your weapon. And maybe what makes Eben so great is the fact that he doesn't have, he's still a massive leader in the group, and he'll always be a leader in the group. But maybe not having that sort of a captaincy armband is what actually gets the best out of him. And certain players relish in the captaincy, and sometimes, the captaincy can be a bit of a burden for players. I'm not saying that he wouldn't be a good captain, but, he's someone who likes to live on the edge. He likes to be fired up. He likes to get involved. He likes, the pushing and shoving. And he likes to toe that line all the time, does he, Evan? And, the last thing we want is to be able to sort of cut back on that. So it's going to be a very interesting decision to see. But, the finality of the Chase of the Sun 2 does premiere on Sunday. We will be doing a video just after. We'll be basically almost doing a live reaction to it just about. So we'll talk a little bit more about them. But I want to know what you guys, what were your takeaways? The scrum and how important the scrum was, Don Human, and going into that. So interesting. What were your takeaways in the episode? Let me know down in the comments below. Please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.